"I'm just not attracted to guys like you," my girlfriend told me. I said I understood. When she discovered her gorgeous roommate was very attracted to guys like me, my appeal ratings skyrocketed overnight. Sierra and I had been together for just over a year, the kind of relationship that looked perfect on paper but felt increasingly hollow in practice, and I should have seen the warning signs during our regular Sunday morning coffee ritual at that little place on Hawthorne in downtown Portland. I'm Owen, 28, a software engineer who genuinely believed we were building something meaningful together, while Sierra, 26 and working in marketing, had apparently been tolerating me while waiting for something better to come along. We were sitting at our usual table by the window, me reading articles on my tablet about new programming frameworks while she scrolled through Instagram, when she set down her oat milk latte and delivered the kind of statement that changes everything. "Owen, I need to be honest with you about something that's been bothering me," she said, her voice taking on that practiced tone she used for difficult client conversations. "I'm just not attracted to guys like you." The words hit me like a punch I should have seen coming, but I kept my expression neutral and asked what she meant by guys like me. "You know, the quiet, intellectual, bookish types who prefer board game nights over going out to clubs," she explained, as if she was describing a disappointing product feature. "I've always been drawn to confident, outgoing, party-loving guys, and I feel like we've been forcing this compatibility that just isn't there." She went on to suggest we take a break so she could figure out what she really wants, but assured me she'd like to keep me as a friend because I'm such a good person, the kind of backhanded compliment that's supposed to soften the blow of being demoted from boyfriend to emotional support backup plan. I sat there processing her words, thinking about all the times she'd seemed bored during our conversations about technology or hiking trails, all the parties where she'd introduced me with that apologetic tone, all the moments when I'd felt like I was disappointing her just by being myself. Instead of the emotional meltdown she was probably expecting, I surprised both of us by taking a sip of my coffee, nodding thoughtfully, and saying, "You know what, Sierra? I think you're absolutely right, and I completely understand." The look of confusion that crossed Sierra's face was almost comical as I continued, "I've actually been realizing we're incompatible too, just from the opposite direction." I leaned back in my chair, feeling oddly calm as I finally voiced thoughts I'd been suppressing for months. I'm attracted to women who actually appreciate quiet moments, intellectual conversations, and genuine connections over social media presence. Sierra's eyebrows furrowed as she processed this unexpected turn, clearly not prepared for me to have my own revelations about our relationship. "I've noticed you seem to perform our relationship rather than live it," I continued, gesturing toward her phone where she'd been crafting the perfect coffee shop aesthetic post just minutes earlier. "Always staging photos, always talking about me like I'm some project you're trying to improve instead of a person you actually enjoy being with." Her defensive walls went up immediately, that familiar flash of anger crossing her features. "That's not true, and honestly, you're being kind of bitter about this, Owen." I couldn't help but smile at the predictability of her response. Any criticism of Sierra's behavior was automatically labeled as bitterness or jealousy, never something worth examining. "I'm not bitter," I said, finishing the last of my coffee. "I'm just being honest, same as you. We should break up cleanly rather than pretend this is working for either of us." The silence stretched between us as she stared at me, clearly flustered by my calm agreement rather than the desperate negotiation she'd been expecting. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "You're not going to try to work on this? Fight for us?" I gathered my jacket and stood up, leaving money for both our drinks on the table. "Fight for what exactly? You just told me you're not attracted to who I am as a person. Why would I want to convince someone to want me?" As I walked away, I could feel her watching me with what I can only describe as shocked disbelief, probably wondering why her carefully planned breakup speech hadn't gone according to script. That evening, while I was sitting in my apartment contemplating the logistics of disentangling a year-long relationship, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source, Haley, Sierra's roommate. Haley was 27, worked as a librarian, and spent her free time creating these intricate watercolor paintings, basically someone I'd exchanged maybe 50 words with during the entire time I'd been dating Sierra, despite spending countless hours at their shared house. "Hey Owen, I heard about today and I'm really sorry," her message read. "I know this might sound random, but I was walking home from the art supply store and saw a for rent sign at this cute duplex right across the street from our place." She went on to explain that she knew the elderly landlord, Mrs. Chin, personally and offered to walk over with me tomorrow to check it out if I was interested in looking for a new place. I stared at the message for a long moment, genuinely surprised by this unexpected kindness from someone who had every reason to stay loyal to her roommate and avoid getting involved in our drama. It was such a thoughtful gesture, especially considering I'd been dreading the awkward process of finding somewhere new to live while navigating the social fallout of our breakup. I texted back thanking her and agreeing to meet up the next afternoon, feeling oddly grateful that at least one person in Sierra's orbit seemed to understand that treating people decently shouldn't be conditional on romantic status. The duplex turned out to be absolutely perfect, a cozy two-bedroom place with hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a small garden that looked like it had been maintained by someone who actually cared about growing things. And Mrs. Chen, this sweet 70-year-old woman who spoke with a slight accent and had the sharpest eyes I'd ever seen, took an immediate liking to me after Haley's glowing introduction. "Haley tells me you write about our local trails," Mrs. Chen said, adjusting her glasses as she showed me the kitchen. "My late husband and I used to hike Mount Tabor every weekend for 30 years. When I mentioned my blog about hidden hiking spots around Portland, her face lit up, and by the end of our conversation, she not only approved my application but offered me a discount on rent because, as she put it, good tenants who appreciate nature are worth investing in. Over the next 2 weeks, as I coordinated the logistics of moving my life across the street, Sierra's behavior became increasingly erratic in ways that should have been concerning but were honestly just exhausting. She started showing up whenever Haley and I were discussing practical matters like utility transfers or furniture placement, hovering in doorways with this tight-lipped expression and making passive-aggressive comments about how helpful Haley was being. "Don't you think it's weird that my roommate is more invested in your living situation than I am?" Sierra asked one evening when she caught us comparing internet service providers on my laptop. I mean, she's being awfully thorough about all this. What Sierra didn't realize was that during these supposedly mundane conversations about moving logistics, Haley and I had been discovering this incredible intellectual connection that I'd been craving without even knowing it. While Sierra had always dismissed my interests as boring or pretentious, Haley would ask thoughtful questions about the technology one worked with, share recommendations for philosophy books I'd mentioned wanting to read, and even showed me some of her watercolor paintings inspired by the same hiking trails I wrote about on my blog. "I never understood why Sierra seemed so bored when you talked about your work," Haley said one afternoon while helping me pack books. "Software engineering is basically problem solving through logic and creativity, which is incredibly fascinating when you actually listen." The more time we spent together, the more Sierra's paranoia escalated, and she started monitoring our text conversations with an intensity that bordered on stalking, demanding to know why we were messaging so frequently about apartment stuff. Things came to a head when Sierra discovered something that completely shattered her perception of the situation. Haley had been secretly reading my hiking blog for months, leaving thoughtful comments under the pseudonym TrailReader23, and even sharing my posts in local hiking groups to help build my readership. "You've been reading his boring blog this whole time?" Sierra confronted Haley in their kitchen while I was fixing a loose cabinet hinge, her voice sharp with betrayal. "Those comments about his insightful observations and beautiful photography, that was you?" Haley didn't deny it, simply shrugged and said, "His writing is actually really good, and his trail recommendations have led me to some amazing hikes I never would have found otherwise." The revelation that someone had been genuinely appreciating and supporting my creative work while Sierra had been dismissing it as a waste of time hit me harder than I expected, and I felt this strange mix of validation and sadness that I'd been with someone who couldn't see value in the things that mattered to me. But Sierra wasn't done unraveling the situation, and her next accusation revealed just how little she understood about what had been happening right under her nose. "This is exactly what you planned, isn't it?" she said, turning to me with fury in her eyes. "You're trying to turn my roommate against me as some kind of revenge for the breakup." I set down my tools and looked at her calmly, realizing this was the moment to share something Haley had told me in confidence weeks earlier. "Sierra, Haley didn't turn against you. She actually warned me about your pattern months ago." The silence in the room was deafening as Sierra processed the statement, her face cycling through confusion, anger, and dawning realization. "She told me you have a history of dating guys you consider beneath you while you wait around for someone you think is more worthy of your time," I continued, watching Sierra's expression crumble as the truth hit home. "She's been watching you treat me like a placeholder for over 6 months, and she felt bad about it." Haley nodded quietly from across the kitchen, and Sierra's face went pale as she realized that her roommate hadn't just witnessed her behavior, she'd been actively disapproving of it long before our breakup even happened. 3 weeks after I'd moved into my new place across the street, I was having dinner with Haley at their kitchen table, both of us laughing over a passage in this philosophy book she'd recommended about the nature of authentic relationships, when Sierra walked through the front door and froze in the doorway like she'd caught us plotting to overthrow the government. The sight of us together, genuinely enjoying each other's company in a way that had apparently never occurred during my year-long relationship with Sierra, triggered something in her that went beyond normal post-breakup jealousy and straight into nuclear territory. "Are you kidding me right now?" Sierra's voice cut through our conversation like a fire alarm, her keys still dangling from her hand as she stared at us with pure fury. 3 weeks, oh, 3 weeks since we broke up, and you're already here with my roommate, laughing it up like this whole thing was some kind of elaborate setup. I closed the book and looked at her calmly, recognizing the accusatory tone that had become so familiar during our final months together. We're having dinner and talking about Kierkegaard's thoughts on authentic existence, I said. It's not exactly a romantic conspiracy. But Sierra was beyond reason at this point, and she turned her attention to Haley with a kind of venom I'd never seen her direct at anyone before. And you, she said, pointing an accusatory finger at her roommate. How long have you been planning this betrayal behind my back? How long have you been waiting for me to get out of the way so you could swoop in? That's when Haley did something that completely changed the trajectory of the confrontation. She stood up, looked Sierra directly in the eyes, and told the truth with a clarity that was both devastating and liberating. Since the first time I met him, Haley said quietly, I've been attracted to Owen since the day you brought him home, and I've been frustrated watching you treat him like a consolation prize for over a year. The silence that followed was deafening as Sierra processed this admission, her face cycling through shock, betrayal, and something that looked almost like vindication that her paranoia had been justified. But I never acted on it, Haley continued, because I'm not the kind of person who goes after someone else's boyfriend, even when that someone is treating him terribly. Sierra's laugh was bitter and sharp. Oh, so you're the noble one here? The loyal roommate who was just looking out for my best interests. No, Haley said, and what she revealed next hit both Sierra and me like a freight train. I'm the person who's been leaving anonymous encouraging notes about Owen's writing in his mailbox for months because I genuinely admire his mind and wanted him to know that someone appreciated his work. I stared at Haley, pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place, the thoughtful comments on my blog, the random notes of encouragement I'd found tucked under my windshield wipers after particularly tough days at work, the sense that someone out there was rooting for me during the loneliest parts of my relationship with Sierra. Those notes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The ones about not giving up on my writing, about how my perspective matters, that was you? Haley nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. I couldn't stand watching Sierra dismiss your creativity and intelligence like they were character flaws instead of the things that make you amazing. Sierra's expression had shifted from anger to something approaching panic as she realized that not only had her roommate been supporting me in ways she never had, but there was clearly a deeper level of understanding and connection happening that she'd been completely oblivious to. This is insane, Sierra said, her voice taking on that defensive quality I knew so well. You're both acting like I'm some kind of villain here when I was just being honest about what I wanted. That's when Haley dropped the bomb that made it clear she'd been paying much closer attention to Sierra's behavior than anyone realized. You mean like how you've been honest about your dating app activity? Haley asked, pulling out her phone. Or how honest you've been about your ongoing flirtation with Derek from CrossFit? Sierra's face went white as Haley continued. I know about the late-night texting, the workout sessions that somehow always run 2 hours longer than scheduled, the way you light up whenever his name comes up in conversation. The kitchen felt like it was shrinking as Sierra realized that her supposedly clueless roommate had been documenting her emotional infidelity, and I found myself feeling oddly vindicated that my growing suspicions about her behavior hadn't been paranoia after all. And my personal favorite, Haley said, her voice carrying a sharp edge I'd never heard before, the way you've been calling Owen my boring boyfriend to your gym friends for months, like he was some embarrassing secret you were stuck with until something better came along. The words hit me harder than I expected, not because they were surprising, but because having them confirmed by someone who'd witnessed the casual cruelty of Sierra's dismissal made the emotional abuse I'd been experiencing feel suddenly real and undeniable. Sierra opened her mouth to deny it, but Haley wasn't finished. Derek told me you've been asking him if he thinks you're settling, complaining that Owen doesn't challenge you intellectually, wondering out loud if you should be with someone more ambitious. The devastating irony wasn't lost on any of us. Sierra had been complaining to her crush about my supposed lack of intellectual stimulation while her roommate had been secretly celebrating and encouraging the very creativity and depth of thought that Sierra found so boring. So no, Haley concluded, I don't feel bad about being attracted to someone who deserves better than being treated like a human placeholder while you figured out if you could upgrade to something shinier. Sierra's response to having her behavior exposed was to launch a full-scale social media campaign that would have been impressive in its scope if it hadn't been so transparently manipulative, and within hours of our kitchen confrontation, her Instagram stories were filled with cryptic posts about fake friends who stab you in the back, and snake roommates who betray your trust when you're at your most vulnerable. She crafted this narrative where she was the innocent victim of a calculated revenge plot, posting quotes about toxic people and loyalty with captions like, sometimes the people closest to you are the ones planning your downfall, and when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Her strategy seemed to be rallying our mutual friend group by positioning herself as the wronged party who'd been blindsided by her roommate's treachery and her ex-boyfriend's vindictive scheme, but Sierra had severely underestimated how much her behavior had been noticed and discussed by the people in our social circle. The first crack in her victim narrative appeared when our friend Marcus commented on one of her posts about betrayal with, "Weren't you literally asking me if I thought Derek from your gym was relationship material like 2 weeks before you and Owen broke up?" That single comment opened the floodgates, and suddenly other friends were sharing their own observations about Sierra's behavior in ways that painted a very different picture of our relationship dynamic. Jessica, who'd been at several group gatherings, posted a lengthy response about how uncomfortable she'd felt watching Sierra flirt openly with Derek at their CrossFit classes while Owen was sitting right there, describing how Sierra would touch Derek's arm, laugh too loudly at his jokes, and make comments about how some guys just have that natural confidence that's so attractive. Our friend Kevin shared a screenshot of a text conversation where Sierra had complained that I was too sensitive and not ambitious enough, wondering if she was wasting her prime dating years on someone who was content with mediocrity. The most damaging revelation came from Sarah, who'd been at Sierra's birthday party 6 months earlier, where apparently Sierra had spent the entire night apologizing to people for my presence, describing me as sweet but kind of boring, and explaining that she was trying to help him become more social and outgoing. Each new comment and screenshot chipped away at Sierra's carefully constructed victim narrative, revealing a pattern of behavior that our friends had been quietly witnessing and discussing among themselves for months. But the final nail in Sierra's social media coffin came from the most unexpected source. Derek himself, the very person she'd been positioning as her potential upgrade, commented directly on one of her posts about fake people and hidden agendas. "Sierra, I need to be honest," Derek's comment read. "You've been making me really uncomfortable with your advances over the past few months. I knew you had a boyfriend, and every time I tried to maintain appropriate boundaries, you'd push harder." His comment continued, "You kept asking me personal questions about my dating life, suggesting we hang out alone, and making comments about how your relationship wasn't satisfying you. I tried to be polite about it, but it was inappropriate, and I felt bad for Owen because he seemed like a decent guy who didn't deserve to be disrespected like that." The revelation that Derek had not only been uncomfortable with Sierra's pursuit but had actually felt sympathy for me completely demolished whatever remained of her victim narrative, and the comments section of her posts became a graveyard of screenshots, personal stories, and first-hand accounts of behavior that painted Sierra as exactly the kind of person who treats relationships as transactions and partners as disposable. Friends started posting evidence of Sierra's contradictory statements, screenshots where she complained about my lack of ambition while simultaneously bragging about dating someone with a stable tech job, messages where she called our relationship boring while posting photos of us with captions about being blessed with an amazing partner. The most telling revelation was when our mutual friend Lisa shared a voice message Sierra had sent her weeks before our breakup, where Sierra could be heard saying, "I love Owen, but he's just not exciting enough for me long-term. I need someone who makes more money and has bigger dreams, you know," followed immediately by, "But he's perfect boyfriend material for now, so stable and reliable." The systematic destruction of Sierra's reputation happened so quickly and thoroughly that by the end of the week, she deleted most of her posts and switched her account to private. But the damage was done. Our entire social circle now had a clear picture of who she really was and how she'd been treating not just me, but the concept of honest relationships in general. The irony wasn't lost on me that Sierra's attempt to paint herself as the victim of betrayal had actually exposed her as the person who'd been betraying everyone around her through manipulation, dishonesty, and emotional infidelity, while Haley and I had simply been honest about developing genuine feelings in the aftermath of a relationship that Sierra herself had ended. Sierra moved out within 2 weeks of her social media implosion, unable to handle living across the street from what she called the constant reminder of my roommate's betrayal, but what was actually just the reality of watching two people build something authentic together based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility. As Haley helped Sierra pack her things, I learned the full extent of how supportive Haley had been during the darkest months of my relationship. She'd been anonymously sharing my blog posts in local hiking groups, encouraging my trail photography by leaving printed copies of my best shots in my mailbox, and had even convinced Mrs. Chun to offer me discounted rent by describing me as a good soul being underappreciated by someone who doesn't deserve him. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when Haley shared her theory about Sierra's behavior, delivered with the psychological insight that came from months of observation and her background in literature and human nature. I think Sierra's attraction to confident, outgoing guys was actually insecurity about her own intelligence, Haley explained as we watched Sierra's moving truck pull away. She resented your genuine intellectual curiosity because it reminded her of everything she felt she was lacking, so she tried to make you feel small to protect her own ego. It made perfect sense. Sierra had always been threatened by conversations that went deeper than surface-level topics, dismissing philosophy, literature, and complex problem-solving as pretentious rather than engaging with ideas that challenged her comfort zone. 6 months later, Haley and I were planning weekend hiking adventures that combined my knowledge of hidden trails with her artistic eye for capturing the beauty we discovered together. Our relationship built on the foundation of appreciating each other's authentic interests rather than trying to change or diminish them. My blog had gained a substantial following, partly thanks to Haley's early anonymous support and partly because writing about places and experiences I genuinely loved had given my work a passion and authenticity that readers could feel. Sierra's prediction that I'd never find someone better had been turned completely upside down. I'd found someone who not only appreciated who I truly was but had been actively supporting my growth and creativity even when I didn't know she existed, proving that the right person doesn't just accept your authentic self, they celebrate it and help it flourish.